Good morning. This is Gene. It's the Monday after that game on Saturday against the Gators. Um, I just want to talk about some of the stuff that I'm seeing online, and I've talked about it in previous videos. I didn't realize that it was so prevalent. This year I've been more and more paying attention to college football. I've always been a fan, obviously, of it, but I just had other issues in my life that that took more of my time. Not I wasn't a type of guy that was watching podcasts or on YouTube and talking to these guys. But as our season got bigger and we started doing more things, I started to get more involved with it. Started looking at the other players. I mean, for a while, Florida State hasn't been good, and I live in Alabama, so obviously I've been watching a lot of Alabama games. Always liked Alabama. I was stationed in Mississippi. Uh, when was it? In the '90s. Um, Went to many games at Tuscaloosa before they upgraded the stadium. Back when they were just basically a mediocre team. Back when Shula was a coach, and um, but I love the tradition, and I've always had a heart for them. I've always looked at them as one of the great elite programs in the country. Uh, Bobby, you know, there's a chance when he was at Florida State. Eventually, he could have went to Alabama. He stayed at Florida State, thankfully. So I've always had this respect for them, as any other great um, athletic. I mean, Kentucky basketball, Duke basketball, Ohio State, Michigan. Even though these guys have only won one championship in the last 1,000 years, and they claim that they're so this and that. Um, and I also have to understand that most of the people that have these podcasts and the people that watch the podcasts are a lot younger than me. So I'm not going to say it's a generational thing, but I'm just, I wake up today, and yes, the game was very difficult. And again, I've told you before, because I had a stroke and I don't watch things that really get me stressed. And Florida State, because I've been a fan um, for what, 50 years, right around 50 years at this point. Um, it just ratchets us up. It's very difficult. Even when against Auburn, I couldn't watch that in the national championship game. I only go in when I know that they're going to win at the end. So it's just really hard for me. I have to watch the highlights after. It's just something that I have, of all the sports teams. It's hard for me to watch them, and I just it's imprinted in me how many times that we've lost things, that we had games won, stuff like that. And it shouldn't affect me that much. I'm an older man. It shouldn't, but it does. So I want to protect my health when this shit happens. Um, but just the vitriol that we have against Florida State right now, apparently in college fandom, I just don't really understand it. And I'm watching this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, you're going to get blown out if you go in the playoff. I don't care if you're 13-0, but you're going to get blown out. And I'm like, I'm asking a very simple question. Other than Georgia, who hasn't been that impressive, who is going to blow us out? We have an elite defense. We could. I'm trying to understand that Michigan. Uh, really, what's happened in the last 5-10 years that makes Michigan have better athletes than Florida State? As bad as we've been, I think the last big bowl that we had before we won the championship, or maybe it was after it, is when we beat Michigan. I just, I don't. What, Ohio State's going to blow us out? I'm just, I don't understand. And then this comparison to TCU, and I'm like, well, fine. TCU beat Michigan in the semifinals, and they lost to Georgia. Now, clearly, it seems like if we get into the playoffs, that they clearly want us to be matched up against Georgia in the semifinals. And I'm saying, bring it on. Tell me who they have. Just because they smoked people in their conference, and they beat a team that was just coming off one of the biggest wins in the program history, and it just snowballed out of effect. And that happens in big games. It used to happen all the time in the Super Bowl. You'd have great teams coming out of the AFC, and they would get boat rolled in the Super Bowl. And these are young kids, and when the things start going down, go bad for them, it's hard for them to come back. Most of these guys are winners, and they're not really used to any type of adversity. We saw that last year. Georgia almost was out from a team from the Big Ten who've not done anything other than what Georgia or what Ohio State did in 2014. As far as the playoffs, they've done nothing. So, but Ohio State clearly had Georgia in a position that they could have lost, and they didn't. They didn't finish the job, and I think the refs had something to do with that. If we're going to make the assertion that Georgia is clearly better than anybody else in college football, they're basically the NFL at this point. That, okay, so if we play Florida or we play Georgia and they beat us, it would be no different that the other teams that they beat in the last 3 years or routed in the last 3 years. Should we just not play the game? Should we just say that Georgia is going to win the championship and not even play the entire season? Are we going to go down this road? And the thing is, I have a lot of respect for the other teams that are behind Florida State right now. I do. I think personally, the games I've watched, and I watch it all now, and I've been everywhere. I mean, when I talk about my experience when it comes to college football, I was in the Northwest. I was down by Alabama. I've seen the Big East when they had good teams like Syracuse and Miami back then. I understand there's a difference, okay? But I also understand that it's been more and more that difference is become very, very close again. They might have one great team like Clemson was in the ACC, or Alabama was a great team in those conferences. It doesn't mean the entire conference is better than every other thing out there. I'm sorry to say this. When these same pundits that are saying that a Florida State should not be in the playoff, they're the same people that said that Missouri will finish sixth in their side of the SEC. And they're apparently one of the top 10 teams in the country. I will take my team against Missouri on neutral field anywhere. I'm not saying that Missouri wouldn't win, and they have that mentality to win, but we have as well. I don't want to state my case. It's already been done. We have to beat Louisville regardless. So it doesn't really matter what happens. It's going to be on the field, but we've won 18 in a row. Do we get anything for that? We beat 4 SEC teams during that time. Do we get anything for that? We beat LSU and the Heisman hopeful. Do we get anything for that? Oh, it was because it was the first game of the season. Okay, let me just say this to you. Give us 4 weeks to prepare for Georgia, and we'll see what happens. I'm not saying we're going to win, and if we do with our backup quarterback, what are you going to say then? And we might go out the next week after that and lose to Oregon or Michigan or whoever. But this idea, I get it. You can make the claim that we probably get beat heavily by Georgia, even though they just barely beat their in-state rival. These are kids. Talent-wise, maybe Georgia has more depth than we have, but we're okay, especially on the defensive side. If your biggest offensive threat is a white receiver, I'm not trying to be racist here, but I think we have guys that can cover him. I'm just saying, and I think that we can get in and we can get pressure on your quarterback. Our defense has got better and better and better and better for the last 6 weeks. They're going to be something to deal with, whoever we play. Now, the question is, we have to play a team that just should have beat Kentucky. And you know what? The ACC, again, dominated the SEC head-to-head, 6-4. I really thought that Louisville was going to beat Kentucky, and they should have, but they didn't. So we were 6-4 against the SEC, the greatest conference of all time. But I'm going to say it's not the right teams playing each other. There's always an excuse, especially when it comes to SEC. They have a mulligan when it comes to the playoffs. Always have. They had it when they started getting good. They also had the BCS. They're the only team that's ever had a two-loss team playing for a championship. So many of them have lost in their championship games, or not even been in the championship games, and they still get in the playoff. because they have this bias that the SEC is clearly better. I'm not going to say that there were times that it wasn't that way. There was a big, certainly a talent uh, gap between that and the rest of college football, and probably also when it comes to coaches. But that's become very, very narrow now. And the idea that Florida State, not TCU, again, I don't understand this disrespect of what TCU did. They beat Michigan. Michigan hasn't lost since then. They just beat Ohio State. And everybody said that the whole thing of the cheating and stuff, they've proved their point because they beat Ohio State again in a game that was absolute dog shit. These guys couldn't do anything against each other, and a couple plays won the game. I look at those teams, and I look at what Florida State has especially on the defensive side. I don't see those teams scoring a lot against us. Now, again, there's a possibility because we have a problem with the run. We give up plays. It's a possibility that could hurt us. But give me, like I said, give me 4 weeks against Michigan. Give me 4 weeks against Georgia. I'm not saying that Rodemaker won't go out there and throw 2 pick sixes and then we get shut out 38-2 or something. I'm not saying that can't happen. But I know I watch my team. I watch those other teams. I have a lot of respect for those other teams, especially Ohio State, Michigan, what they've done. Not so much about their student body, but how they are, what they actually teach at their universities. I have a lot of respect for that. I'm an old school college football fan. And these teams still have not done anything other than what Ohio State did when they ran the table, beating Alabama. And what I mean, it's like back then, is Alabama going to say, well, we weren't ready for that game? When the SEC loses, they have some sort of built-in excuse. It shouldn't be okay. I'm going to tell you what will happen. Again, clearly, if Alabama beats Georgia, they should be in the top 4. Regardless of the fact they should have lost yesterday or Saturday. But they made the play, and they did what they had to do. Again, another in-state against a team that's only got 6 wins, and they win by 4 or 3, and it's now considered a great thing. But we win by 9 in the swamp with our backup quarterback, and it's not good enough. There's a double standard here that I just have no time for. But so obviously, if Alabama beats them, they should be in the top 4. And there's a lot of people say that even if that happens, that if we're in there as well, that they're going to be above us. So they won't be playing. That they'll make sure that we'll play somebody that's going to be as hard as it possibly be. I hope to God that Alabama wins at this point. I was wanting Auburn to win because I don't want to deal with this shit on Selection Sunday or whatever it's going to be, and they're going to say they should be over us. And if there's everybody else is coming in, let's say Washington continually wins, and they're gonna knock us out for Georgia or some shit. I hope they win, and I hope that they're no. Of course, they won't be number 1 then. That means we'll get fucking Michigan. I hope we do. I hope they put us number 4 then, and I hope we go out to the Rose Bowl where we lost to Oregon 10 years ago in a game that we gave away to them. But let's go do that and give me 4 fucking weeks. Give me 4 weeks and try to stop that Jim Harbaugh offense, that Big Ten offense. Give me that 4 weeks. Now, I'm not saying we weren't going to win because we're not going to have our best player, but give me 4 weeks. Give me 6 months to prepare for LSU, and then boat row them, and then we don't get credit for that because that was their first game of the year. This quarterback is the greatest of all time. They couldn't do nothing in the second half against us. It's strange to me, and I'm like, why are the rest of the people against Florida State? And so some of these podcasts on YouTube that I watch, and it's been recently that I've watched these guys, because some of these guys are saying that we should be in regardless, but then they have it when they actually have their rankings, they have us like 8th, so which is fine. Everybody has an opinion. That's fine, but I'm just wondering that these are the same people, young people, and then you have people that watches them. They take their talking points off of this, or the old guys like Feinbaum and all that stuff saying that Florida State should not be in, and these guys hitting the fucking table saying there's no way that Florida State should be in there. Alabama's clearly better. Hell, Missouri's better. And I'm like, this guy's like 7 years old, acting like he's 12. So you got all this. When you talk about the media and what the media can actually influence, this is what you're seeing. I'm like, why are you against a team that has the tenacity to always come back, that changes during the game, finds something that works, and continually wins? Whenever the shit goes against them, they get the resiliency to come back and win. And then let me again, it's not like we're TCU here. It's not like we don't have 5 stars and 4 stars on our team. TCU was totally different. They had a lot of 3 stars and less, but they still went in. They fucking beat Michigan, got to the finals, and you're comparing us to us? Well, fine. I'll take that comparison. Give me the final. Give it to me. Give me one chance against any team in the country and see what happens. If they beat us, fair. Who cares? We're going to have a different playoff system next year. Are we? It's just, I don't understand what the Florida State team is. First of all, it's a good team. These are good kids. Compare them to Florida and what they did and how they tried to kill our quarterback and how they're spitting on people and doing shit all the time. And that program has had so many felons. I don't. I'm not getting the 90s maybe when we were winning everything, even though we didn't win a whole lot, but we were in the top 5 for 15 years. If you had a problem with Florida State from back then, okay, I guess. I don't understand the vitriol against Florida State because these other big brands that might be left out, like I guess Oregon because they got Nike there, and of course Ohio State, who always they want a mulligan like they had last year. They lose to Michigan, they still get in. Okay. Georgia loses, they get in, or Alabama loses, they get in. It's like the Big Ten and the SEC always has the ability to have these mulligans. So in my video, I did the nightmare scenario, it's about a month ago, and I said it could still happen. I don't think it will at this point because Alabama, even though they beat Auburn, how they beat Auburn, I don't think that helps them. But clearly, if they beat Georgia, regardless, they're going to be in. So you have the media that are pushing this. A lot of people on TikTok, a lot of people, young people, their podcasts are just saying the Florida State shouldn't be there because they will get beat. And there are some people come out saying that's not how we play in sports. I don't think anybody thought that Michigan was going to lose to TCU. I don't think that going back further, I don't think that everybody thought Boise State was going to lose or was going to beat Ohio State or Oklahoma. But then you'll hear like when Utah just destroyed Alabama. Now, Alabama was undefeated until they lost to Florida, I think, there. And they end up going, Florida plays the championship, and Alabama plays in the Sugar Bowl. But they weren't motivated. They weren't motivated. That's why they got beat. Okay, that might be true. I don't know how an 18, 19, 20-year-old guy doesn't want to do well at their last game, or a guy that's a senior that goes out and doesn't try to do their best. I think they got beat by a better team. And the thing with football, it's clearly a team game. So you can have situations, and I can go back to NFL when Hostetler came in for Sims and they got the Super Bowls and won. I can go to football as well when Ohio State came in with their third-string quarterback and won the championship. What was Alabama? What was their excuse for that year? They were in the Sugar Bowl. All their friends their fans are down there. They only drive 4 or 5 hours. Oh, 3 hours. I don't even know. It's from Tuscaloosa. It's not that far. What was their excuse that year? I mean, of course, Oregon or Oklahoma or Ohio State won it that year because, like I said, we basically gave the game to Oregon. I'm not saying we're going to beat Oregon in that game. I think it was going to be like a 50-48 kind of game. We just kept giving the ball back to them. So is this what we're talking about from 10 years ago when we were undefeated and they put us down here and we had to go across the country to go play Oregon, who was ranked ahead of us? Is this what this is? Are we going back to then saying this is the same situation? I don't see, other than the team is the same as far as it's Florida State. We didn't have a good defense that year. This year we do. I think we can hold our own against anybody. You know what? Maybe Michigan can come out their first drive and run down our throat and maybe get a touchdown. But once we get we change or what we're going to do, I don't think they'll do it again. You can't deal with the referees. I mean, against Florida, their only touchdown was something that shouldn't happen. So again, I'm not saying we were probably a top 20 type of team when you took a talent coming in, but we have this ability to continually play when the things are not going our way. We make changes. We make big plays against Clemson. These things happen to teams that are good teams that have mentalities to play. But when somebody is saying that Florida State should be compared to TCU, I'm saying fine, compare us. I'll take getting to the final and playing whoever is available at that time, whether that's Georgia or Michigan or whoever, and we'll see what happens. We'll fucking see what happens. This is not Florida State has a fucking brand. We haven't been good for a couple years, but now we've won 18 in a row, and I think you should put some respect on that. I really think you should. Doesn't mean that we can't lose to Louisville. I mean, Louisville lost a very bad game, a game they probably should have won. So I'm assuming those kids are going to say, you know what, everybody's going to think we're not going to win, and they're going to play their hearts off. You can have guys at Louisville fans that are not used to them being in a position to win a championship when it comes to college football. They're going to be in North Carolina, I think. They're going to be rooting for their team. I think there's going to be a lot of Knowles there as well. I think it's going to be a good game, and I think it's going to be very close. And we're going to see at the end of the game, if it's close, who has the team to win the game. Now, it could be Louisville. A lot of shit went bad against them against Kentucky. I really wanted them to win that game because I wanted us to have a win against a top 10 team. If you're not going to put, I don't know, maybe a LSU might be in the top 10 now. I don't know. They've got 3 losses, but who knows? So all that stuff is fine. I've been talking for a while here, but I'm just going to kind of finish with my whole thing here. I just want people to tell me, because again, Michigan and Ohio State were in the Final Four last year. They both lost, and they hadn't lost a game until they played each other again. So I'm thinking, how good is the Big Ten? Now, they're going to get Oregon and other teams later on, but is you're going to tell me that Penn State is their 3rd best team? And I'm like, I think that's a big drop down. I just think it is. I don't think they're that good either. I mean, I'll take my 3rd or 4th best team in the ACC this year is Clemson, and I'll play Penn State anywhere. I just don't think that everybody thinks there's a big, huge difference between the Big Ten, the SEC, and the ACC, and there isn't. And in this year, they say the Big 12 is one of the better teams ever, and I'm like, okay, maybe, but the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season, Washington doesn't look like a top 4 team. They might have a good quarterback, but really, they haven't looked that good at all. Now, again, if they go undefeated and they're a Power 5, they probably should be in the playoff. And nobody's even saying that there's any reason why they would not be. They're somehow comparing us to Washington. And I'm like, okay, whatever. If it comes down to that, whatever. If we're 4th and they're 3rd, fine. If they just do it for money, I mean, personally, I would think it's going to be whatever the Big Ten person is. It's going to be Michigan and probably the Big 12 champion in one side, and it'll be us against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. That's what everybody wants. And what are they going to say then if we go there and beat Georgia and New Orleans? What are you going to say on that field? And you'll let it travel across. I mean, it's basically the same that people from Florida go into. What are you going to say then? Oh, they weren't ready for it. Oh, they already won 2 in a row. Oh, they weren't as great. Or they'll what? Or it's going to get really close and maybe we lose at the end or some shit. Well, they weren't ready. They were just thinking about the next week after that. That's not how you play sports. You have to be on the field. It's like why did we even play the Soviet Union in 1980? When they were clearly the best team in the world at that time. Why did our team even go out there and play? We have to look at the analytics. We have to say clearly they have more players. They have more talent. They have to be there. It's all part of all this, the money ball and all that shit. And people get there and say, well, clearly they're the better team. How many times do you have to be told that football is the quintessential team game? If everybody's on the same page and everybody's working for each other and they have love for each other, you can do great things. TCU did great things with a subpar team. They got to the finals. They beat the Blue Blood in the semifinals in a great game. They just didn't have enough at the end of the day. And normally that's what happens, right? And then you have to celebrate Georgia for what they did as a two-time champion. You got to do that. But that was last year. They're not as good as where they're. And people are going to say they're going to switch to the thing, and that's what they're. And they didn't do anything against Georgia Tech. They just keep them around. We got to be ready for next week. We can't really go after Georgia Tech. When you do shit like that is when you fucking lose. When you don't show up or you think you can just turn it on because you're Georgia. That's not how it works. Especially for young people, it's not that way. So, again, it could be all moot point. Everybody wants chaos. I think it's very clear at this point. If Florida State beats at Louisville, they're in, probably at number 4, no matter what we do. If Oregon beats Washington, they're in. If Washington beats Oregon, they're in. So they would both be probably ahead of us. If Michigan wins theirs, they're going to be 1 or 2. And the only real issue then at that point is if Georgia loses to Alabama, there's going to be a lot of people, and they're already just foaming at the fucking mouth right now, that says that Georgia would be in over Florida. Regardless of how bad Washington has been playing the last 6 weeks, the fact that they do have that win against Oregon gives them up there. And obviously, if they beat Oregon twice, it's going to be very difficult for us to compare to that. Although Oregon hasn't played anybody, and they have one ranked win against Oregon State. And I don't know if Oregon State's even in the top 20 anymore. So we'll see what happens. Personally, if let's just say it's a very close game and Alabama beats Georgia at the end, like how they did against Auburn, and they decide to kick us out and say that Georgia needs to be in because they were number 1 all year, and they did this when they lost. No one at number 1 has ever gone all the way out of the top 4 in a close game during the playoff years at the end. So it's a possibility that could happen. I don't care. Then we'll be 13-0, and we'll go on. And it's just my wife sending me something. And if that happens, we'll go and play somebody, probably Texas or something like that. And if we beat that game, there's a very good possibility we'll be the only undefeated team left. Because even if Washington somehow beats Oregon, they're not going to beat these other teams who are in the playoff. They don't have, their defense is not that good. I think people have actually figured out their quarterback. I think that's why they're not doing as well. I'm watching them play the last 4 or 5 weeks. They're not getting any separation when it comes to the receivers. I don't think they're that good offensively. I think that teams could shut them down. And if you have a good team that can run the ball, I think you could beat them. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Oregon's going to beat them. But we'll see. So if Georgia gets beat by Alabama, they're still in. They have a loss. Alabama has a loss. If Oregon gets in because they beat Washington, they have a loss. There would be no team left other than us that's undefeated. So, fine. And we'll be the only team that's undefeated after we beat Texas. And what are you going to do then? You're going to give your playoff championship to whoever. Let's say Georgia stays and wins 2 more. They're going to probably give it to them anyway, right? They'll still give them AP. And the other ones at the end of the day, if they go through it and actually get back, beat Georgia or whatever, beat Alabama. What's the other side of that? That no Alabama team would, or let's say Georgia, no SEC gets in at all. What if Alabama wins by a point in a game? They both are out. That won't happen, of course. They're going to try to get both of them in. But that's the scenario if that happens. If we beat Texas, who beat Alabama. I mean, there's a lot of ways. If you want chaos, wouldn't Texas be over Georgia because they beat Alabama and Alabama beat Georgia? I don't think it's going to happen. I think we play early, so it's okay. But if we beat Louisville and it's just that's how we played Florida, or like everybody else played during the rivalry, other than Oregon and Oregon State, we'll just see. we're going to see, and you're going to lay a lot of these, I guess, a lot of younger people that have been influenced by a lot of these people that are just online or on their podcast, and they just think that they have this idea that they understand. I'm like, when I was 25, I thought clearly we had the best team. I mean, the entire state of Florida had the best players, and then all of a sudden, teams started really going and recruiting and take all our players out of Florida, and then that kind of like changed the balance of that for a long time, and then we kind of came back into it. But Miami has never been the same during that time. 20 years they haven't been. Every now and then they're okay, and Florida had their little run in the early 2000s, but they have not really been the same since, because it happens. The talent becomes, streamlined around the rest of the country, and then when you have now you can actually pay them. So, I guess at the end I love college football. Whatever happens, happens. I will be happy for Louisville if they do if they beat us. I have no issue against Louisville. I've seen them play. I've been at their stadium. We're really fans are pretty good there. I have no problem, probably any of. The only problem ever in my life has been with Florida fans. They're just not good people. So I have never had any issue with any Alabama fans, Michigan, Mississippi State fans, Ole Miss. I've been everywhere in the SEC. Never had any issue. Georgia, not really. But it's like this hate media, sports media, and all that stuff that you have to continually have this issue with everybody, and somebody's more clearly deserving, and then when these pundits, especially guys that are older than me, sit there and say, no, this is about being who's the most deserving. Based on what? On what metrics? Then Alabama, regardless, should not be in the Final Four. If Texas goes the rest of the time, Texas will have to be over Alabama. If you want chaos, that's fine. I mean, Texas is a huge fucking brand too. And again, they've played somewhat average the last 3 or 4 weeks. This is what happens at the end of the season. And the teams that actually can hold on to the entire time, that have the fortitude, is the ones that deserve it, if you're going to say at the end, to be in a position to play for that. But as a Florida State fan, will I be upset if we let's say we cover against Louisville. I think we're up by 5 when it comes to that. And they decide, because Alabama wins at the end of the game, as they did at Auburn, that they feel that the two-time defending champions should be allowed to defend his championship, and they knock us out because of that, and somehow Washington somehow beats Oregon. It's still going to be a great season, and at the end of the day, we could be at the very end of that. We could be the only team in the Power 5. I don't think James Madison, if they're undefeated. We're going to be the only people that's going to be undefeated if we end up beating Texas, let's say, or if Texas gets in whatever. But if we get in, that's going to be a great season. If that's going to be at the Orange Bowl or something like that, that's going to be a great season. And it's not going to be like UCF a couple years ago about claiming their championship. We will have a right to claim our championship as being the only undefeated team in the entire land. And all it will do is help for our recruiting and everything else. And I just, at the end of the day, I'm just like, what's the problem here? I mean, again, I have not been in Tallahassee for a long time, so I don't know. Maybe there are a lot of guys online, they're Florida State fans, and they're being assholes online. I don't know. But I don't think, nobody thought we were going to get the playoffs this year. Even though after we just blowed out LSU, I don't think all of us thought they were going to get into the playoffs. I thought we'd probably lose at Clemson, and we almost did. And I thought maybe Miami or Florida would be better. I thought we were going to be 11-1, and it's very possible we can't do that now. We could be 12-1, and there's a possibility that we'll go in and get blown out in the playoff. But okay, they set up the playoff really just to quantify the Power 5 conferences. I don't like it when they did it. Didn't like the PCS either, even though it helped us a couple times. But if you have, it could be 4 undefeated teams from the Power 5. They have to be in. Sorry, and if Texas is the one team that's left out, even though they didn't lose in their conference. They lost to, oh, they did. They lost to Oklahoma. That's right. They have to be, they're out. Sorry. If you're gonna, you have to. Are we gonna actually look at the Big 12 and compare them to the ACC? I'll take that one too. I will. So, I think that North Carolina and North Carolina State, Duke, Wake Forest could have a decent record against the Big 12. I just think they would. Now it could be 50-50, but it's not like this big, huge difference between. I don't think the ACC is so far down, and I think we've shown it last 4 or 5 years. We've also won 3 championships in the last 10 years. So, and only Ohio State's won for Big Ten, and the rest have been SEC. So, I don't know. You let me know in the comments below. I know I've been talking for a long time. I just don't understand the vitriol against, and when I see guys that have huge follow-ins on YouTube saying that everybody in college football is they want Florida State to lose. Did they want that for chaos? Is there a problem you have with Florida State? Personally, great coach, has values intact. All the players run for or root for each other. I don't understand the vitriol against Florida State. Let me know. Is something in your past that was you went to Florida State and you saw a game there and the players or the fans were just assholes to you or something? Just let me know. I've never experienced it. I'm not saying we don't have young people that do the same shit, okay? And they have their own YouTube channels and all that stuff, and maybe they'll say stupid shit. But even Florida State guys understand that there's an issue. The guy from Warchant, the guy that runs it, Gene over there, same name as me, he was talking about the nightmare scenario before as well. We all thought that that's a possibility because of the clearly SEC bias when it comes to this. And some of that's warranted. They won about 70% of all the championships the last 15 years. So, or it's probably 80%, but some of that's warranted. But again, you also have to look at the mulligans that a lot of these guys get, that they lose during the season and somehow they get to the championship and win. It's like Florida's never been undefeated, but they have 2-3 championships. Interesting. Are you going to say because the SEC is so fucking good? Okay. I can go through and I can give you 8 or 9 times that teams have gone through the SEC champion league and not lost a game, or have got to the championship game in the SEC, and both sides have not lost in the SEC. Alabama and Georgia this year. Georgia lost to Texas, or Alabama lost to Texas at home. Texas is not the SEC yet, and everybody's talking about they're not going to do anything when they get there. Okay, neither did Texas A&M. They beat Alabama. Missouri from the Big 12, Big 8, went in and they're 10-2 now this year, or they're going to be if they win their bowl game. It's just, again, I'm going to stop now because I keep talking, but I just want to know what's the issue here. If we win, we should be in, regardless, right? Put us against Florida or against Georgia. Georgia wins. And if Georgia somehow loses and we're still in there, if we don't get knocked out because of it, because we know there's a possibility that could happen, I say it's a small one, but it's a possibility, then give us Michigan and give us 4 years or 4 weeks to prepare for it and see what fucking happens. And then if you guys end up winning and Michigan just beats, are they going to beat us man-to-man? Strength to strength? Do they have better players in all positions? Is their quarterback that much better than the guy they have on the bench or the guy that's behind him? I don't think it is. And I don't think Georgia's quarterback is any better. I'm thinking that really the team that's got the most balance on both sides is probably Oregon. But again, has Oregon ever won it? They beat us in the semis 10 years ago. Maybe this is their time. It's a possibility. This team is one of the biggest. They get a lot of fucking money. So I'm sure they have good players. They got a lot of players out of California. It would be good probably for a team outside of the ACC. It'd be good for the Pac-12 since they're blowing it up this year. I wouldn't be upset. I like Oregon. Been a couple games there. I have several Oregon shirts and hats. I don't have this vitriol against other institutions when it comes to that, because at the end of the day, it's student athletes playing a game that we all love to watch, and the fans are so toxic when it comes to this, and they push this narrative that's just not true. We should applaud and celebrate things like TCU last year, the fact that they beat Michigan, and the fact now that the media is going back saying Florida State's going to be like TCU, and that's a bad thing. Why is it a bad thing? They won their semifinal. Ohio State didn't. Michigan didn't. We didn't in 2014. These are good things because they lost to a dominant SEC team that had won the year before that. I think that I think it's not a fair way to portray that and compare us to each other, because it's not right. Because you know what? First of all, we haven't won our championship game, and we haven't won the semifinals once we get in. So right now, TCU is clearly above just about everybody else that's ever played in the playoffs. I mean, other than Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and that was the first year of the playoffs. There are a lot of other players, a lot of other teams out there that did not win. Oklahoma, who was against Michigan, Ohio State. Michigan. That was when Baker was there. Who was there? Or it was Georgia. They have never won a semifinal. Texas have not won a semifinal. Now they got to a BCS championship game and lost when what's his face got hurt. I mean, so TCU is right there with them. So go ahead and compare us to them. It's just an absolutely stupid comparison, and it's because they lost to Georgia. Okay, that's like LSU. I mean, come the fuck out of here. Clemson got blown out by LSU. Was Clemson a bad team that year? I mean, we gotta get past this shit. Anyway, you guys go. I'm going to put this up. Just let me know in the comments what you think is going to be the Final Four in the playoffs. If you slated the entire thing, which is great if you did, or if you think that the top four. I'm just going to tell you what I think it will be. I think at the end of the day, Georgia will beat Alabama. All this chaos will be whatever it is. I think Oregon's going to win, and I think that Michigan's going to beat Iowa, and I think that we're going to get in somehow. We're going to beat Louisville somehow. How that actually plays out, I'm assuming it's going to be us against Georgia, whatever that's going to be, and Michigan versus Oregon. I think that's how it's going to be. I think that's what the fan faces want, and nobody wants us to play us in the final. If we somehow get through it, they're not going to want to play us. I'm just letting you know. So they're going to put their big dog out there and just say we should not even been there. Okay, like I said before, give me 5 weeks, give me 4 or 5 weeks to game plan for you, and just see what we can do with it. See what happens. Just tell me that LSU was so inferior to Georgia in every possible way, even though they were number 5 coming into the season. Just tell me that they're so much lower than when it comes to Georgia when they have the Heisman probably winner on its team. Okay, I'm out then. Okay, and it could possibly go that way. I am not saying that we should be favored in any of that game, but the idea that we can't play against any of those teams man to man, team to team, is ludicrous. Anyway, guys, you guys have a great day, and we'll see what happens this weekend. You guys have a good rest of your day. Goodbye.